Hi, we're going to talk about argumentative writing. The argumentative essay is a genre of writing that requires you to investigate a topic, collect, generate, and evaluate evidence, and establish a position on the topic in a concise manner. We use argumentative methods in everyday life. For example, Bob and Susie have gone to a movie. Bob makes the claim, "That was a lame movie," and Susie says why. Bob provides evidence. He says, "The special effects were bad. The monsters were obviously fake." Susie makes a counterclaim, and she says, "I thought the movie was good because the acting was believable." Now, to refute her claim, a bad response would be, "You're an idiot." But a good response would be, "Yes, the acting was good, but the horrible special effects were too distracting and caused some awkward moments." So here you see that Bob has acknowledged Susie's position, but he has refuted it and emphasized his own point. So here you have the structure of an argumentative essay. You'll make claims, provide evidence, acknowledge counterclaims, and refute those. Persuasion is used sometimes in argumentation or is done completely on its own. For our paper and purposes, we'll be mixing the finer points of both components. So persuasion is the action or fact of persuading someone or of being persuaded to do or believe something. Argumentation is the process of establishing a claim and then proving it with the use of logical reasoning, examples, and research. So, a persuasive essay focuses more on emotion. Some of the things that we will not be doing, but that you can typically find in a persuasive essay, will be making claims based on opinions. It may not take opposing ideas into account, and it's emotionally based. However, we will use ways of writing and persuade by appealing to the audience's emotions or by relying on the character or credentials of the writer, which is you. This is primarily an argumentative essay, so we will use all of the components that are key for a great argumentative essay. And those are making claims based on factual evidence or research, making counterclaims where you are taking the opposing viewpoint into account. You'll be neutralizing or defeating serious opposing ideas, and you'll convince audiences through the merit and rationality of the claim and proofs offered. This is logically based. So we'll walk through the elements of argumentation. First, you have your argument or your claim. Your argument states a claim, like we saw with Bob and Susie, and supports it with reasons and evidence from your sources. Arguing your side makes you the proponent. Next, you'll have counterarguments or counterclaims. Those are arguments that stand in opposition to your arguments or claims, or the other side. The counterargument is your opponent's argument that tries to say you're wrong. So if you take a look at the cartoons, you'll see a good counterclaim, says it straight, states the opponent's claim, refutes it, proves it wrong, and uses reason and evidence to beat them to the punch. The cat with the tongue out is an example of a counterclaim that is not so valid, which would be name-calling, denigrating the intelligence of the opposition, or not having solid reasoning to show where they're wrong. So the refutation is simply disproving an opposing argument. It's an important skill because it is how a writer successfully convinces the audience of the validity of his or her own argument. So you're acknowledging that your arguments don't exist in a vacuum. You know that there is another side to the argument that you're making, and to not acknowledge that side would make you seem ill-informed. You can't present your arguments and pretend like no one in the whole world opposes what you are saying. But to do that, you acknowledge it, and then you provide more backup to show why your side is the correct side. So if you remember from the Rhetorical Triangle from reading throughout the semester, you'll use ethos, pathos, logos, which are fancy names for credibility, reasoning, and values. Effective arguments consider all of the points of the triangle. They're interrelated, they support each other, and all of the corners, while they're in separate corners, overlap. There are times when you will use primarily one method of persuasion. There are times where you will use all three simultaneously in the same paragraph. So it really is just dependent on what you're writing and what purpose you're trying to convey. Organization is extremely important in your argument paper. It's going to guide your audience through your reasoning process. It's going to give clear explanations of each of the points that you're going to argue, and it's going to show your credibility as a writer. And it does this by showing that through this organization, you've really thought through your points and are able to make them, refute them, and move on. So, this is a great area where you should probably take some notes or plan to write this down. This is how you'll want to organize your argument. You want to have a creative and key title that is neither the assignment or generally the thing that you're going to write about. For example, I'll use one of the off-limit topics throughout the paper as an example. So one of the off-limit topics is abortion. A title for your paper can't be abortion. There's just nothing there. Next, you will have an introduction. Your introduction should give some general background. It should catch the reader's attention, and it should provide, of course, the thesis statement. Next are your body paragraphs. Here you're going to construct your topic sentences, build main points, and counter the opposition. And then you'll conclude. So talking a little bit about your title. The title introduces the topic of discussion to the audience, and it generates reader interest in the argument. If I just have my paper titled Abortion, what does that tell my audience, other than abortion is going to be mentioned in this paper? If I'm anti-abortion, I don't know if I'm about to read a pro-life paper. If I'm pro-life, I don't know if I'm about to read the opposite side. So not having any clue going in is off-putting to your audience, and it's really something you need to spend a little time working on. Typically for me, I do not come up with a title until after I'm done writing, usually. I'll have it in the back of my mind that I need one as I'm writing, and sometimes when I write something, it'll come to me, but I don't try to force it. I don't try to come up with it first because it can be kind of limiting. I do my writing, then I try to generate my title. Some ways that you can create a title. You want to grab attention by offering a provocative image. You want to pick up on words or examples offered in the body or conclusion of the paper, and sometimes by asking a question. When it says ask a question, it should be a thought-provoking, interesting question, not something really vague like, what is abortion? Or could you have an abortion? Those are not drawing in. Those are just kind of low effort, not really interesting titles. So again, avoid titles that are too general or lack character. A title is not the subject of the paper. A title is not the name of an assignment. The introduction. The introduction acquaints the reader with the topic and purpose of the paper. It also generates the audience's interest in the topic, and it offers a plan for the ensuing argument. So, in the simplest terms, here's what you're going to do with each section of the paper. In the introduction, you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them. Hey, I'm going to talk about abortion. And I'm going to talk about how it has psychological effects, how it can be performed even if it's outlawed, and how there's a lot of money spent legislating whether or not it's right or wrong. The body. You're going to tell them. So here you're going to talk about those 3 points that I made in the introduction. You're going to say, hey, here's what happens. Here's how much money we spend. Here's the psychological effects. You're going to list them out and talk about them, and you're going to expand on whatever you're going to make points about in the introduction. And then in the conclusion, you're going to tell them what you told them. So here you reiterate, thinking back, I've told you about this, I've told you about this, I've told you about this, and then you wrap it up with a little interesting closing line. Keep in mind, while I'm saying I, you don't actually put yourself in the paper for this. So again, introduction, tell them what you're going to tell them. The body, tell them. Conclusion, tell them what you told them. It's really pretty much that simple. So, methods for constructing an introduction. You can start with an example. It can be real or hypothetical. But this should be really brief, and I really don't recommend this. If it's a real life example, remember that this is in third person. You can't make it an I situation. Hypothetical is fine, but what I found is when students attempt to do this, it's far too much. They get really caught up in the narrative piece and forget that this is an academic researched argument. Some better ways are shocking statistics. You don't want too much source material in your introduction. You want to mainly let you speak for you about what you're going to tell them. But sometimes it's interesting. For example, I'm just going to make something up here, but if you came into a paper and you said 4 out of 5 middle school students have been targeted to be recruited by ISIS. Well, that's pretty shocking, and that's terrifying, and that'll grab your reader's attention. So if you can come up with a shocking statistic that's really eye-opening that people are probably not aware of, that's going to be a great way to open your paper. If you don't have a shocking statistic and it's nothing all that interesting that you can include later on, come up with a better way. You can also open with a really striking image, and what that means is you paint a picture for the audience. So if we were going back to my much decried abortion example, you could say, you could describe an abortion clinic, either an illegal one if you're writing for abortion, or you could describe what goes on in a modern day clinic if you're against abortion. So you can paint that picture for them. The best way in 102 is to just give a little background and summary. Don't spend a lot of time racking your brain for the other strategies. If you have something, you have something. But the best thing is to just talk a little bit about it and just kind of dip your toes into the topic. You don't want to go into everything you're going to cover in the paper. You don't want to go straight into what you're talking about. You want to warm up the audience and just kind of ease them into what you're going to talk about, and then give them your thesis to really explain the points you'll be covering. So let's talk about the thesis statement. This is the most important sentence in your paper. This lets the reader know the main idea of your paper, and it answers the question, what am I trying to prove? It's not a factual statement, but a claim that has to be proven throughout the paper. An important thing to remember is that the thesis is flexible. What you come into your paper initially with for a thesis should change and should bend as you write. It's very rare and it's pretty unusual that you should come in with a set thesis and not change it at all. As you research, as you develop your ideas, it should become something that needs to change a little bit because you'll learn more about your topic. So here's a little thesis practice. Which thesis statement is the most effective for an argument about the need for V-chips in television sets? V-chips are the things that monitor what kids can see. So you say, parents, often too busy to watch television shows with their families, can monitor their children's viewing habits with the aid of the V-chip. Or, to help parents monitor their children's viewing habits, the V-chip should be a required feature for television sets sold in the United States. Or, this paper will describe a V-chip and examine the uses of the V-chip in American-made television sets. So if you guessed the second one, you're correct. You might say, why? The first one's perfectly good. Well, the first one doesn't make what the paper is going to be about abundantly clear. So here you see parents, they're often too busy to watch television shows with their families, and they can monitor their kids' viewing habits with the aid of the V-chip. The V-chip isn't the main focus. It just seems more like it's going to be about parents who are too busy to monitor television. Kids might be out of hand. The V-chip can help. But it's more like this is going to look at different things parents can do to monitor their kids' television show watching. The second one is a better sentence and the best sentence for this thesis because it tells you parents need help with their kids' viewing habits. And the argument they're going to push is that the V-chip should be a required feature for television sets sold in the United States. With the first one, that's not made clear. You don't know that the argument's going to be that every TV in the US should have a V-chip. It's too vague for that. The third one comes right on and says, this paper will describe a V-chip and examine the uses of the V-chip. So here you've got repetition. You're saying V-chip twice. You're just flat out stating this paper, which is not ever an acceptable thesis. You need to craft your writing to make a more clear, concise argument and make it abundantly clear to the reader what you're going to be arguing. So let's talk a little bit about body paragraphs and topic sentences. So body paragraphs build upon the claims made in the introductory paragraphs. They organize with the use of topic sentences that illustrate the main idea of each paragraph, and they offer a brief explanation of the history or recent developments of the topic within the early body paragraphs, which can help the audience to become familiarized with your topic and the complexity of the issue. So if you remember how to structure a paragraph, you open with a topic sentence, and that topic sentence guides what's going to be in that paragraph. So if it doesn't fit within that topic sentence, it's time for a new paragraph. So I might have written this on your papers or put this in your comments, but anytime you see a massive block of text, you need to stop and edit and look where you've missed some topic sentences, because each paragraph is its own structure. It opens with a topic sentence. It uses your words to make that topic sentence. You talk about your point, you bring in some research to support that point, and then you wrap up the whole paragraph with your own words again. So if it's not tying back to the point being made with that topic sentence, you need to edit into a new paragraph. So you have to really look at how you're breaking up these paragraphs. So when you're structuring your argumentative paper, your body paragraphs can be ordered in a few different ways depending on the topic and purpose of your argument. So you can order your paragraphs from being very general to getting more specific as you move throughout the paper. You can flip that and make your most important point right off the bat and then move to your least important point. And you can also do that with weakest claim to strongest claim, so build on importance throughout the paper. So you do have to make your counterargument. You will be addressing the claims of the opposition. It's important, as I've mentioned a couple of times in this recording, and it helps build a convincing argument. It shows that you're credible as a writer. You've looked at all the sides of the issue and you've made an informed decision. One of the worst possible things, if you've ever experienced this, is arguing with someone who is very ill-informed. And when you try to present your side, they just keep coming back with the same information that they've already mentioned because they don't know the other side. If you're going to be a critical thinker and really understand audience and making good arguments and really expanding your worldview, which is part of the overall college experience, you want to look at both sides and make an informed opinion. You weigh side 1 with side 2, and maybe there are sides 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, there can be many sides. Look at all of those and what all of the opposing sides have to say, distill them through your mind, and then formulate your own opinion versus, oh, well, my parents told me that this is how it is, and that's just what I'm going to believe. So this really goes a long way in helping you form your own opinions. So you do that by looking at the counter arguments to the argument you're making. You have to acknowledge that they exist and that you've thought about them, and that even though you've thought about them and that the other side makes a great point, you're still right because, and that's where your research comes in. So, when you're making your counterarguments, you want to consider your audience when you address the counterargument. You want to concede to some of your opposition's concerns, which demonstrates respect for their opinions. That's using language like, while I understand that, or Jennifer Coster makes an excellent point when she says this, however. So those are just some ways that you can bring those in. You want to remain tactful yet firm. You don't want to use rude or depreciating language that can cause your audience to reject your position without really considering what you're saying. So you don't want to say, while Joe Blow says this, he's grossly ill-informed and obviously doesn't have anything above a 3rd grade education. That kind of thing is really off-putting to a reader. So make sure that you don't bring that in or just dismiss them out of hand. So where do we put these counter arguments? A few different places. Counter arguments can be located at different places in your body paragraphs. You might want to build each of your main points as a contrast to oppositional claims, or you can offer a counterargument after you have articulated your main claims. So you can either say, I think unicorns are the most important animal that there are existing today, and then you can contrast that with the oppositional claim within the same paragraph and say, however, there are others that feel that grizzly bears are more important. You can also offer a counterargument after you've articulated your main claims. So you can talk about the importance of protecting unicorns in a natural sanctuary environment or whatever you're writing about. You can say, you're going to make these 3 points. You can make your 3 points, support them with research, and then you can have a separate paragraph after those 3 main points to talk about the counter arguments against making special considerations for this particular unicorn. So it really just depends on how you want to structure it and how you feel it would be best. The integration method, where you're alternating between points and counterpoints, can be a little challenging. If you're going to do that, I recommend that you outline your paper first and really understand your topic. To be perfectly honest, making your points and then making the counterpoints afterward is much easier for a 102 paper. So here again are some organizing ideas for an outline. There are 4. You are certainly welcome to use C and D, but I highly recommend A and B. Model A says thesis statement, argument 1, argument 2, argument 3, then you counter and refute and conclude. Model B opens with thesis, then talks about the counter arguments against your topic and refutes them, then moves into the arguments for them, then concludes. Nothing wrong with C and D, but again, for 102, A and B tend to work best. And if you saw that, this isn't going to be a 5-paragraph essay. So in 102, you should really move out of that mindset, because we don't write 5-paragraph essays in here. We write paragraphs that we need to make our points. So research and body paragraphs. The research material can aid you in proving the claims of your argument and disproving oppositional claims. Be sure to use your research to support the claims made in your topic sentence. Make your research work to prove your argument. Don't do what's called writing around the research. Don't find a quote and build a paragraph around it. You should make your points and then bring the research in to support whatever point you're trying to make. So, your conclusion. Your conclusion should re-emphasize the main points made in your paper. So if you open talking about subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, you want to order your body paragraphs to talk about subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, and then in your conclusion, you're going to emphasize the points that you made, subject 1, subject 2, subject 3. You do not want to cut and paste verbatim what you've said. You need to find a new and interesting way to restate those points. You might want to reiterate a call to action or speculate on the future of your topic if that's appropriate. So if you are using my random unicorn example, you could say that if something is not done to preserve the sanctuaries of unicorns, they will definitely face extinction. We must work harder to provide, or not we, because we don't want third person, but animal groups should be supported in their efforts to provide sanctuary space for unicorns. So there's your call to action. Or if you want to speculate on the future of your topic, you're doing that as well. You don't want to bring new claims into your conclusion. If you haven't already talked about it, this isn't the place for it. So if you made 3 great points and you remember that there's 4 and 5 that you could have talked about too, this isn't the place to add them in. Then it looks like you forgot them or didn't understand what was important for your paper. So don't bring new claims into your conclusion. So again, your introduction, you should have told them what you're going to tell them. Your body, you should have told them. And your conclusion, you want to wrap up and tell them what you told them. So again, title, introduction with thesis statement, body paragraphs that construct topic sentences, build main points, and counter the opposition, and your conclusion. If you need further help, I highly encourage you to use Purdue OWL. There's a link to it in your course under Extra Resources. This will give you additional MLA help and guidance. Generally speaking, if I have a question and want to double check something, this is the site that I will use. So if I'm using it and you're using it, then hopefully we can overlap. Hope this helps.